there's like a song that I've been listening to. I discovered, and it's like one part's like, do you take sugar in your coffee? You take honey in your tea.
Yeah.
And clearly, as beautiful as I sounded right there, that's all I can think about now when I put sugar in this.
Literally. What, like, is it like a country song? That feels like country words. Like, that feels like... Yeah. I don't know. I did karaoke in Mexico. Bad at it. Hello.
I love that you went along with that.
Welcome back to another episode of Sometimes Ciabatta Slaps.
I'm Mac.
I'm Jubes.
And today is book club, baby.
Yay!
We are very excited about this book club because it's The Inflamed Mind by Edward Bullmore, and it's all about inflammation's interaction with depression.
That was really interesting.
And it's very, very much up on my alley and what I'm interested in.
Definitely.
So.
It's my favorite book we've read so far.
Ooh, so we'll get into it.
Yeah.
Catch up. My voice is a bit better.
Yay.
It's not great.
It's good though.
It's less it won't cut out.
It sounds stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then last night, so one of my best friends is getting married in June. And last night she sends a group message to a bunch of like family and friends saying like, oh, if you have any photos of me and her fiance, can you send them to me? I've been friends with her for 14 years.
I know. I saw her post and I was like, I'm so ready for this.
Yeah.
I was like, Michaela has receipts.
Yeah. 14 years of friendship. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was like, you want everything? And she said, yeah, give me everything.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, okay. So as I'm going through my photos on my computer, all the ones that I deemed like appropriate for family and like good enough quality to share, because we just have so many just like random shit photos.
Yeah.
350 photos.
Holy cow.
350 photos.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put that in Google Drive, sent it off to her.
Amazing.
So I was like, you want everything?
Yeah, like all of it?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that's what we did for that. And that's just like on my computer. Like that's not on my phone in like recent photos.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
So
that's sweet. Because yeah, when I saw that post, is she just doing that for their bridal shower or is she doing that for their wedding, too?
They're just going to do a slideshow and just have a slideshow going.
Okay.
Of like, yeah, of both of them.
Yeah.
Like, doesn't matter what age. And I'm like, bet I have our first selfie we've ever taken together and I have our last selfie we've ever taken together.
That's sick.
Because we had like, I played with photo booth, on my family's first Mac desktop that we got when we moved.
Yeah.
Here.
That's sweet.
So I was like 2007 selfie.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
And so 85% of her slideshow is going to be selfies of us from the ages of like 9 until 25.
Yep, that's fun because we were definitely born in the era of like recording and taking pictures of everything.
Everything.
Like I am terrified for my wedding because I've got some embarrassing footage out there.
Well, and I didn't even like go through the bad like Snapchat photos.
That's not even the embarrassing.
No.
Oh no.
I didn't even add those ones in. We have the ones where you like with like the Snapchat era where you doodle over everything.
Right.
And I have one of her with she chose like the brightest blue color she could.
Yeah.
And she did it on her eyes and she wrote, "I'm Nash Greer."
Oh my gosh.
Throwback to Vine.
I love that.
So I have that one. I did incorporate one of our face swaps.
Oh good. That's fun.
It's a funny one.
Yeah, no doubt.
I also have a video. I didn't send all the videos. I sent 3. But if she wants more videos, I've got plenty.
Plenty.
You know who you are. Reach out to me. But there's a video of us singing in her bedroom to "You Got a Friend in Me." And she's walking around with a mannequin head on her head because she took cosmetology, and she's going, "You've got a friend in me," just like swinging with this mannequin head on her head.
I love it.
And I'm like, my arm is like wrapped around behind my head, and I'm like snapping and singing
That's
along.
amazing.
And we just look bonkers.
No kidding.
So I did incorporate a video of her singing along. I can't remember what song is in the video right now, but she has like a blanket over her head, so she looks like a ghost.
Oh, yes.
And she's like twerking as a ghost in this blanket.
That's going to be a good one.
So I have that one on there.
Yeah.
But
that's sweet. She's smart in that she's compiling the slideshow versus allowing other people to compile the slideshow.
Well, she said she's not going to incorporate all of them. And I'm like, rude.
Yeah, that's kind of mean.
I just sourced 350 photos for you not to put them all in.
I just did your whole slideshow.
Rude. Yeah, that's all you need.
Yeah, like, hello, I'm maid of honor, so
B&M
about me too.
B&M obviously stands for Michaela. I'm obviously the M in this relationship.
Get it together.
Duh.
Oh my goodness. No, I'm excited to see that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Journey will be there.
I'm Michaela's +1.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, same friend. Because I'm not seeing anyone. And I didn't give her like, oh, I'm dating so-and-so. Like, I didn't give her any of that. And so she goes and she's like, yeah, I made Journey your +1 because I really want her there.
I was like, decent. Okay.
Like, okay.
Yeah,
that's
love
good.
That.
Works for me.
Yeah. And then like on the invitation, it was like Michaela and Journey.
Yeah.
I was like, adorable.
Michaela and Journey slaps.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
We have to bring our son Simon Terry.
No, kid free. I don't want a baby. Yeah.
It is a kid free.
Mm-hmm. So. Okay. Yeah, Simon Terry, suck it. You gotta stay home with Papa Bruce.
Oh, I love that. Do you have any ketchup stuff, Jubes?
Not really.
Jubes is gonna make granola.
Yes, I'm making. My grandma has a recipe for a super, super yummy granola, so I'm gonna make that, which I'm pretty excited about because it is to die for. You're
in your food prep era.
I'm in my food prep era.
I love it.
So hopefully that goes good. I like went to the grocery store and I just bought like veggie stuff, and I was like, sick.
Yeah.
So I realized I forgot like lots of things, but hey, what can you do?
And I want to know your update on the skyr yogurt when you can try it.
Yeah, I'm excited. Well, I'm like, dude, it's coffee flavored yogurt. Like
have you never had that before?
Mm-mm.
Oh, it's
no,
good.
I've never seen that.
It's interesting. It's if you drink it like you think you're gonna have a latte, it's not gonna taste like a latte.
Yeah, I feel like
it tastes a little bit sweeter. It tastes like an iced coffee more.
Okay,
more
I feel like I'm not gonna hate
or like
it.
a coffee ice cream.
Well, I like that it's like coffee ice cream. That's exactly what I want. It's like there's a gelato restaurant in Belize. Oh, I go there and I get like their cappuccino gelato or whatever. Deadly. Yeah. So good.
Yeah, I love coffee flavored ice cream is my favorite. AKA just like blended coffee and
literally
vanilla ice cream.
Yeah.
Just make me a frappuccino.
Well, I'm learning that I'm really only like cream in the coffee. Like I just like the cream. Like I'm not gonna drink like a cup of cream, so I'll put like coffee in it. But that's mostly why I like coffee.
That's so funny.
Which is
that's like 95% of the people who come to the coffee shop.
Well, I mean, like sometimes coffee's gross, but cream is always good.
Always
within its expiration date.
Always, yeah.
There's a window.
There's a stretch, but there's also times where just like cream just like gives you the shits, and that's not always good.
Well, so does coffee, though, right? Like
not
sometimes.
It is a stimulator, but yeah, I don't get the same effects.
Yeah, I never really had like the coffee makes me need to go pee. Really, like immediately.
It's a diuretic.
That makes sense, but I never got the coffee shits.
I used to. And then I fixed my gut, and now I don't.
Someone told me that the reason you get, like, coffee poops is because there's blended cockroach in the coffee beans. And it's the reaction to the cockroach that's making you... So if you don't get the coffee shits, then there's no cockroach in your beans. But if you do, then there's, like, a lot of cockroach. I do not know how true this is.
I feel like it's not totally untrue, because I definitely feel like there are bugs that get into the roasting process. There's no way, like if spider legs are in chocolate bars and things like that, there's no way that it's completely contaminant free or bug free.
Yeah.
But no, it's just like a stimulant. And so that's why.
Yeah. So
weird.
I just choose cockroach free coffee, I guess. So
Yeah, go fair trade, organic, cockroach free.
I'm really like anti-animal cruelty, animal testing.
Yeah.
I don't like cockroaches in my coffee. That's just unfair to the roaches. Even though I've never seen a real live cockroach in my entire life before.
My favorite thing to do is to compare people to cockroaches.
In what sense? Like, hard to kill?
Yeah.
Okay.
They just got like 9 lives.
Honestly, yes, I do have a cockroach friend.
I can't remember who I was just referring that to, but I was talking to my parents about someone, and I said they're like a cockroach.
They just won't
and
die.
My parents were just like shook. Because it's like, that's not how you describe a human ever.
Yeah.
You know? But
that's so fun.
Yeah, just like invincible.
Yeah, literally.
Like, that person can get lit on fire and they wouldn't die. Like, they'd be good.
Yeah. Oh my
like
gosh.
A cockroach.
That makes so... Spencer's a cockroach.
Spenny is a cockroach, that's for sure.
100%. He prefers the term immortal, but...
Same thing. They're synonyms.
They're synonyms. For the sake of this story.
He also makes you shit.
Oh my gosh. Let's hope he doesn't listen to this one.
Or do.
Yeah. They're not gonna make it in. We've talked about cockroaches for 5 minutes. They're not listening.
Penny, if you hear this is your free cash and you can come on an episode.
Yeah. We'd like to interview a cockroach.
Alright, I guess we'll get into book club.
And on that note, we're gonna talk about depression.
Yeah. And inflammation in regards to depression. Woo. So yeah, as we talked about and said 500 times before already, The Inflamed Mind by Edward Bullmore. So it was written in 2018, and what I love about it is that it's chock full of studies that are primarily within the past decade.
Yeah, they're very recent studies.
Yeah. And so, like, for reference, like, the book is 220 pages long, and there's, like, 10 pages of sources.
Yeah, I love that.
So, in typical book club format, we'll just kind of go through the chapters and talk about what we liked, didn't like, found interesting. Yeah.
Just to kind of, like, preface, like, the focus of this book is on immunopsychiatry and how the immune system and nervous system interact, and how inflammation of the body can cause mental symptoms like depression. It's looking at only one of the causes of depression.
Yeah.
This isn't like a be-all, end-all answer, and we're not trying to say that if you have depression, you're just inflamed and, like, there's not something else going on. Like, we're not trying to invalidate anyone else's experiences with depression.
Yeah.
Where he's just written a really good book that kind of talks about another thing that could play a role in depression.
Well, and so the author himself, Edward, he was a medical doctor. He went to school like in the 80s for medicine. And he did some immunity focused work.
Yeah.
Right? And then he's now has switched into psychiatry.
Yeah.
And so in his experience, what got him to write the book initially was meeting patients and saying that these SSRIs are going to help your depression. And they're like, this one guy questioned, how do you know?
Yeah, like, how do you know that I need an SSRI for my depression? You've done nothing to tell me that, right? Like, there's been nothing. Yeah.
And so that planted the seed in Edward's brain. And I love how you use these authors like first names.
First name basis with Mr. Eddie over here.
Okay, but what do you say, Edward or Mr. Bullmore?
Edward. He looks really friendly in the back of his, the leaf. Because I checked out, he has a ton of letters after his name.
Do they say it all here?
Did I say what?
Do they say all of his letters there? Or is it just...
So Professor Edward Bullmore, MB, PhD, FRCP, FRCP Psych, F Med Sci, trained in medicine at the University of Oxford, and then at St. Bartholomew's Hospital in London, before specializing in psychiatry at the Bethlem Royal and Maudsley Hospital and learning clinical science at the Institute of Psychiatry, King's College London.
Yeah.
So
he's British.
Yeah.
This is a UK focused book, but the principles are still the same, and the principles are what I'm interested in, and that's what the whole gut-brain connection that is coming up now.
Yeah.
And it's like I read this book and I got so excited because it's just one step closer for nutritional psychology to become a focus, and then I'm like, boom, that's what I want to do. So.
Because a lot of the things that got him like down this path was that he had like a patient with like rheumatoid arthritis, and she was like, oh, like, I'm feeling depressed or whatever, and like he told another doctor kind of be like, why aren't we looking into this? And he's like, well, you'd be depressed too. Like if you were always in pain, like duh, like that's just how that goes.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of looking at blending the medicine and this like psychology because they're so divided right now. It's either like a problem that medicine can solve or a problem that psychology can solve. Like there's no common ground in between. And so that's kind of what he's looking for.
Yeah. And even, I mean, my personal opinion, I even think the blend of East and West is so necessary for...
It really is, yeah.
Because you can't say, like, I'm not under the impression of, like, okay, just eat 20 pounds of garlic and you never need another antibiotic in your life. Well, no, you, like, there's time and place for antibiotics and there's time and place for medications for mental health symptoms. But how much of that can be alleviated and how much by just, like, nutrition alone and inflammation in this case? Exactly, yeah. Right? Yeah, what are the numbers and who would benefit more from a lifestyle change versus an actual physical medication?
Exactly. And that's what I liked, because towards the end of the book, that's what he started talking about was like, because you need to make this like almost individual for each patient, because each patient is different. They each have like their separate background or whatever. So like,
well, your genetics and your gene expressions and what
exactly
things have gone on in your life that trigger certain genes, and now that's a relevant thing of your life, and how much of it's just like a hidden thing that might never actually get like activated.
Exactly. Or like how much of it is like nutritional thing or like so he was just kind of like, we need to make this so patient focused, but it's so hard to have individual diagnoses kind of like for individual people because we don't know enough yet. Like we're still at the very beginning of this research because we think we solved it with the limited amount of like antidepressants that we have on the market now. They're like, yeah, we're done, we're good.
Yeah.
But he's like, no, like we still don't know why. Yeah. We still don't know where this is coming from, why people have depression, like what's going on.
Yeah.
So
what we're talking about basically wraps up what chapter 1 is for the book.
Yeah.
One thing that he mentioned, like a statistic that he shared that I thought was really interesting, is that depression is on track to be the biggest global disability by 2030.
That was a terrifying statistic.
But
it's true, yeah. Like there's been so much of just like between burnout and like we talk about like millennials and like blah 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 generational trauma and all that fun stuff, and then Gen Z and like whatever, like you see it as a trend now.
Yeah. Well, and then even in our recent like past couple of years, you go through a pandemic, you instill fear in everyone. Everyone's freaking out.
You lock them in their homes for 3 years.
Yeah. So now they don't want to socialize.
Yep.
And then now, because everything just like stopped, we're in so much debt.
Literally.
So now if you want to buy a home and have a career and keep your head above water, you're struggling. Like
it's hard to do.
And if you weren't set up beforehand, right? Like if you had a career and you were able to work through and you're set, then you're good. Yeah. You're not great, but
you're better than the average, right? Yeah. Like the homelessness that's going on right now is absolutely insane. Like the housing crisis is wild.
And the food crisis, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So what's available for purchase are those highly processed, chemical-filled foods that cost $2.
Yeah, because everything in the grocery store is obscenely expensive.
Yeah.
And even in the UK, they had that whole, like, they're charging so much for heat in order to, like, they don't want you to use heat as much to save the environment. Dude, it's the middle of fucking winter. They need heat.
Yeah.
So there's people who like can't afford to heat their homes because we've just went through a pandemic.
Yeah.
And now they're like, no, you actually can't heat your home right now.
And so the fact that this was written in 2018, the world shut down in 2020, and the statistic was for 2030.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure like, it's at least 2025 now.
Come on.
Like there's no way.
So... Yeah. And then, like, as Dirty said earlier, he goes into his patient that he calls Mrs. P.
Yeah.
Who, had rheumatoid arthritis and was very depressed. And his doctor friend was just like, well, no, duh, you're depressed, you have an autoimmune disease. Like, that sucks.
Yeah. Another thing from the first chapter that he kind of brings about for the rest of the book is how the fact that we still have depression means that it was naturally selected for throughout evolution.
Yeah.
And so he's like, what is the like benefit to having depression? Like, why was that something we evolved into? Like, why did we continue to choose that?
Well, it's a survival thing, right? Because if you're not afraid of anything and if you have no fear, I know depression isn't always fearful, right? Yeah, it's not always fear driven, but like it keeps you like stable and in one place and like you rest.
Yeah.
And things like that. But
yeah, it's just weird because
then
it
like, also leads to more undesirable things.
Literally, yeah, like it can be so bad. So it's like, why is this something that we chose?
Yeah,
like
that genetically.
Yeah, that we've naturally selected for. Not that anyone like chooses to be depressed, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. You know what? Today seems like a depression day.
Yeah.
Let me just like
it was good, and then it
myself
got like
so I'm inflamed.
Literally. That's how I felt Tuesday. I was like, it just feels like a rainy day. I just want to curl up by the fire and have some tea.
Aw. He starts bringing up the concepts of neuroimmunology and immunopsychiatry, or as what I've talked about before, psychoneuroimmunology. It's all the same principles. And this concept was first criticized by the medical community for his, quote unquote, is for being disrespectful to the philosophical underpinnings of scientific medicine.
Yeah.
To compare the brain and the immune system. And I was like, what the heck? What kind of comment is that?
Literally.
Science is constantly trying to disprove itself. Is that not the whole
literally
principle?
The whole scientific theory.
Yeah.
Like,
so why would you say it's disrespectful to the principles of medicine?
Well, and that's one thing that I loved about this book was that he talked about like how the like Western medicine system evolved.
Yeah.
Like he talked about
even within his time, right?
Descartes and Celsus and someone else, but like all the big players and how they've like made it so that this is what it looks like, how there's that divide between mind and body. Yeah. Basically.
But they're interconnected.
There isn't. Like I don't understand like how can whatever. So then to kind of lead into what he's going to talk about later on, he then talks about how cytokines, which are an inflammatory protein, can send inflammatory signals across the blood-brain barrier to the mind. And that is what the whole principle of the inflamed mind comes from. And there's study associated with it to link inflammation and depression. Yeah, because previously it was not believed that things could cross the blood-brain barrier. Cytokines, like the inflammatory proteins. Like anything. Yeah. Like when science first started or whatever, they were like, nothing crosses the blood-brain barrier. Like it is a barrier. Nothing gets across there. And now they're kind of like, what? The brain has to communicate with the body somehow. Yeah. Right? Like it's not a one-way road. Yeah. So. Exactly. Yeah. So fun. So that's chapter 1. Yeah. So chapter 2 is like the workings of the immune system. So that's when he gets into like the nitty-gritty of the immune response. And this is all very similar to what we kind of mentioned in our nervous system regulation episode, where it just talks a lot about nerve cells and white blood cells and endothelial cells, and how inflammation is what the immune system uses to protect us from the non-self or antigens. Yeah, he does a really good job making sure that you as the reader have all of the knowledge of all the things that you need to know in order to understand what he's talking about. And there's pictures. And there is pictures. He does have illustrations, which is awesome. Yeah. Yeah. If you're a visual learner, he has some diagrams about how these processes work. Yeah, definitely. He talks about like some of the key ingredients to like the immune system's efficiency. He gives you like the history of inflammation, like what we used to think about it, like bloodletting and all that fun stuff. Yeah. And then how it's kind of evolved into what we know now, which is pretty interesting. And and then he talks about inflammation, just like what it is, like what inflammation looks like in your body. Yeah. And how it can cause changes in how the brain works, which can cause changes in mood, cognition, and behavior that we recognize as depression. So like, why don't we believe that they're linked, right? Well, like if inflammation, again, like low-grade systemic inflammation is one of the number one causes for heart disease. You're telling me that the brain is immune to that? Literally. If your heart is... Yeah. Right? Like, come on. Yeah. And it was kind of difficult to, like, for me to wrap my brain around, like, what inflammation of the brain looks like. Because you can see, like, oh, your cat scratches you, you're, like, red and inflamed or whatever. But it's hard to visualize that, like, in your brain. It's like, well, what is that like, right? But how does toothpaste inflame? Literally, it's like, I don't understand. But it's like, if you didn't know the reference, one of our first episodes, Journey explained that the brain is the consistency of toothpaste. Yes, exactly. How do you inflame toothpaste? But yeah, right? Like, it doesn't make sense. So it was kind of it was beneficial for me for him to point it out, like, this is what it can look like. It doesn't have to be in the brain. It can be literally anywhere else, right? And that's what's going to cause those cytokine proteins to go through your blood-brain barrier and fuck you up a little.
Yeah. And so inflammation as a whole is first attributed to the Roman physician Celsus. Mm-hmm. So he's the first one to call inflammation a syndrome. Yep. And then he kind of talks about tetanus, and like he studied tetanus. Tetanus sounds like my nightmare, honestly. Yeah. Like lockjaw, oh my gosh, never being able to consume food. Oh, a nightmare.
Well, wouldn't you die pretty quickly though once you get tetanus? Like,
yeah, well, because you can't. But like, to feel your jaw seize up.
Yeah, nightmare. No, thank you.
Nightmare fuel. That's like that's my biggest fear is tetanus.
Yeah, that's fair.
I do not mess around with a rusty anything for that reason.
No, thank you.
And then this fact that I thought was interesting that he talks about is that the biological war between people and bacteria started with Homo sapiens 150,000 plus years ago. Mm-hmm. Which...
That's a vague statistic.
I know.
That's like...
I know.
The biological war between humans and germs started with humans.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But prior to Homo sapiens, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why wasn't there any biological problems then?
Well, we don't know. We don't have enough of the evolutional record in order to know. Like, we're still discovering certain, like, genus of humans, right? Like, they just discovered a whole brand new one.
Yeah.
And they just anyway.
I wanted to pick your anthropological brain about that because I took one bio-anth class and I hated it.
I love it. It's so interesting. It's so cool to see all, like, the different humans. It's really boring at the beginning where they, like, go into, like, monkeys and apes, but once they get...
That was my entire class.
Rip.
That was 4 months of learning about different monkey skulls from way back when, and I was like, I'm done. I'm so bored of this.
Yeah, once they get down to, like, the ancient hominid kind of area, that's when it gets really interesting.
So why was there no bacteria warfare then, or do we just not know about it?
I feel like we just don't know. Like, there's no way that there wasn't.
Yeah.
Right? Like, but now we can, like, classify it and we can see it because Homo sapiens we know the most about.
Yeah.
Like, we're
the most biologically similar, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because herpes started because I was either like a Neanderthal or Homo erectus had sex with a chimpanzee. That's how we got herpes. So it's like there's...
So then what? But then we start with Neanderthals or Homo sapiens before Neanderthals?
No, like around the same time, kind of. Like some of us have like Neanderthal ancestors.
Yeah.
But like they're...
But Neanderthals aren't Homo sapiens.
No, they're just a little bit different. They're like bigger chested and like different. They've got different bone structure and stuff.
Well, their forehead is really
and their like faces are different. Yeah. But
interesting. Like I noticed that when they're in their brow bone, sometimes like a really heavy brow
they've
bone.
They're really thick. They're just like bigger boned, kind of. But yeah.
Complete side comment. We're talking about genetics. I went to my dentist, dental hygienist, the other week, and when she was like cleaning my teeth, she's like my number one fan.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. But we talked about how I only had one wisdom tooth, and she's like, do you know you're like in the top 20% evolved people of the world? She's like, that's a flex. I would say I'm the top 20% evolved all the time if I were you. And she's like, and you're not prone to cavities, and you have no plaque on your teeth. You're just like perfect. And I'm like, and I have green eyes. And she's like,
amazing.
Wow. She's like, you are like a top tier human. I'm like, thank you for gassing me up.
Thank you so much.
You gotta stop. My ego is gonna be way too big at the end of this.
Well, yeah, that's something really interesting that I learned in one of my anthropology classes, is that our jaws are actually evolving so that we don't have wisdom teeth.
Yeah.
Because we don't need them anymore. Like, we're not eating the kinds of foods that we need wisdom teeth for.
And you're not losing teeth as regularly as you did, so you don't have to back up.
Yeah. I'm gonna double check my herpes stats and put it in this video. But yeah, it was because I had like sex with a chimpanzee, and like that's how that started.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so you're welcome. So there was germs before Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
We just know the most about Homo sapiens because that's
why I found that interesting.
Us.
I was like, I need to pick your brain about it. All right. And so is that all? Do you have any more for chapter 2?
No, that was pretty much it for chapter 2. Yeah.
So chapter 3, titled "Hiding in Plain Sight," and this is when he kind of goes back into the philosophy or like early medicine philosophers.
Yeah.
So it starts with like Descartes.
I always pronounced it Descartes in my head.
Descartes. You're probably right.
No idea if that's correct.
I don't know.
Let's maybe Google that. Descartes.
Descartes?
Yeah.
So he brought up the principle of Cartesian dualism, which is like two things in the world, two domains of experience, outer and inner. And so Eddie boy, he
my boy Ed.
My buddy Ed. He then uses Cartesian dualism examples a lot because it is very prominent in medicine, or how medicine is formatted now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very not proficient, but like you see it a lot in the Western medicine. It's the whole separation of mind and body. Like, they're two different Cartesian planes, pretty much.
Exactly.
But yeah, so Descartes was a mathematician and philosopher. He was not a medical professional.
Yeah.
So it's mind-boggling to me that his ideas are the basis for modern medicine.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, dude.
Well, this goes back to Pythagoras.
Well, that's true.
How can you create the Pythagorean theorem and then just brush off angel numbers as pseudoscience?
Be numerology, yeah.
Right? How can Descartes
bring up
Cartesian dualism, but then now all of a sudden that's the only reason why we're not studying the gut-brain connection? Like, come on. Like, why?
Yeah.
Or what? If anyone knows a Roman Empire that could, like, come on the podcast, I want to pick their brain. Can someone just bring up...
We could resurrect some...
Yeah, because, like, I got a bone to pick with Descartes and Pythagoras and...
Literally.
Caesar, all of them.
Yeah, because Descartes' kind of thing was the dream versus waking world realization that he had. And so his kind of basis was, I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
Which I think too hard about that, and I don't understand what it means.
Well, but Descartes, he also, like, labeled the pineal gland as the home of the soul because it's mobile.
Yeah.
And the pineal gland is, like, the god within the machine.
Yeah.
So that's really just indicating that your brain is so separate from your body.
Yeah. Oh, his I think therefore I am was that he was dreaming and he was like, how do I know what's a dream versus what's real?
Yeah.
So he's like, I think, therefore I am. So whatever I think must be true kind of thing.
That's a Billie Eilish puts out one of her songs.
I think, therefore I am?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah.
She was talking about someone with an ego. You think that you're the man, I think, so therefore I am.
Oh, that's awesome. That's kind of badass. And then I have just like a quote here that I'm assuming Descartes said was like, we have also learned that inflammation and autoimmunity are involved in many disorders that were traditionally considered to have nothing to do with the immune system. Okay, so no, that was written by Eddie.
Eddie boy.
But like it makes sense, right? Like we're learning every day that our immune system has a larger part in our body.
Yeah.
So why are we ignoring the fact that it might, or not looking at the fact that it might have something to do with your brain?
Yeah. And so then he brings up studies about how cytokines and other inflammatory proteins are more concentrated in the blood of patients like Mrs. P, who has the autoimmune like rheumatoid arthritis. But to talk about that is career damaging territory for him. And that makes me so sad because why aren't you actively seeking for a solution?
Literally.
Like if this is a possibility, why isn't there more exploration? Like I understand to prescribe something like any form of like NSAIDs, like aspirin and ibuprofen.
Yeah.
Well, you don't know the effects on it exactly, right? So just start prescribing things that are anti-inflammatories.
Yeah.
Medications. I get why you don't do that. But why isn't that an exploration? Why aren't you like, oh, there are some studies coming out saying that inflammation can contribute to this.
Yeah.
Have you tried consuming more antioxidants in your diet?
Yeah, exactly.
Consuming more foods like curcumin, which has anti-inflammatory properties.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, why wouldn't you try to like deal with the inflammation? It's the whole thing where like the modern medicine system is dealing with the symptom, not the problem.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what he's going into is like, yo, we can see the symptoms, but what is the problem? Let's go there. Like, dealing with the symptoms isn't enough.
Yeah.
Like, you need to go further.
Yeah.
But
and he then brings up a study here that monitored TNF, which is tumor necrosis factor, which is a specific cytokine. So an anti-TNF was predicted to fail, but in a 2002 study, it was shown to help rheumatoid arthritis. 79% of people responded to a high dose, 44% responded to a low dose, and 8% responded to a placebo, which is insane for a study like that.
Yeah, literally.
But why isn't that being looked into further as regard to like inflammation? Because a cytokine is an inflammatory protein.
Yeah.
So if TNF is a specific cytokine, why is that connection not there?
Yeah, exactly, right?
I got questions.
Right? And like these are all the questions that he's asking too. It's like, why? We know what inflammation can cause. Why is this such a career-ending jump for me, right? Like, why am I getting like laughed out of a job kind of thing?
Yeah.
Chapter 4 is Melancholia after Descartes. Is
Descartes.
Descartes. Melancholia after Descartes. Oh, that's the name of my band.
That's like, which episode is it where we're talking about Mariana Trench?
Oh, the carburetor of the
Earth. I kept saying Mariana's, which is the band.
It's just Mariana Trench?
Mariana Trench.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
And I just kept saying Mariana's Trench. And so the entire time I'm talking about
amazing.
The deepest part of the ocean, but I'm saying the band's name.
That's weird. Mariana Trench.
That's funny.
That sounds wrong.
Right?
Okay. Veto that.
Petition to rename the Mariana Trench. To add an S.
Literally.
It makes more sense.
It just sounds better in my brain.
Oh, that's funny.
So this one kind of talks again like what melancholy can look like after separation of mind and body. Again, like the bloodletting, talking about how like we've naturally selected depression and that depression is even more medically ancient than inflammation, and we've known more about depression, or we knew about depression before we knew about inflammation, but we didn't know, like we called depression the melancholia.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't labeled as depression. It was labeled as like being melancholy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm questioning every single one of my words.
Yeah.
So the inflammation was around the time of the Romans. Melancholia has been since the Greeks. That's what he said. So the school of Hippocrates, 400 BC, and they brought up like two facets of melancholia. And so it's called agnor animi. If I'm saying it wrong, I don't want to hear it anymore. Which is basically the agony of the soul. So fear, despondency, doom, and gloom.
Yeah.
The cognition deficits.
Oh my gosh.
Which is pessimism and unrealistic beliefs. So basically they distributed the concept of being like melancholic into two different forms of like depression.
Right, yeah.
So it's like, is it unrealistic beliefs or is it like fear of the outside?
Ah, spicy fun.
Yeah. And back then, this is where the concept of like the 4 cardinal humors came from, because they explained this physiologically by black bile in the spleen. We now know that bile can't be black. Yeah. But back then, bile was black, and that's why you had melancholy.
Right.
And so the concept of the 4 cardinal humors is there's different physiological excretions, right? So there's black bile, yellow bile, phlegm, and blood. And it's they use it as a diagnostic like explanation for the appearance of diseases. So having too much phlegm was like caused apathy, which would cause chest disease. Having too much yellow or like regular bile, what bile is, is mean you're very angry and you're prone to liver diseases, which
that makes sense. Yeah,
because the bile and the liver, they work together. Yeah, in digestion.
And like when you have a liver disease, like your eyes go yellow, your skin goes a little bit yellow, like you're jaundiced.
Yeah. exactly. So having too much blood means you're positive, but you're prone to heart disease.
How does one have too much blood?
And too much black was melancholy.
Okay.
And so as we know, black bile is non-existent, but that was the whole concept of like this diagnostic physiological treatment for psychological expressions.
Yeah.
So
wild.
Weird. But the inventor of the first psychological treatment was Freud, our old buddy pal Freud.
I love Freud. I find him just, he just tickles my brain. I love it.
He's a little bit nutty.
He's extremely nutty, but I love him.
Yeah.
I also, like, I don't know a lot about him, so I learned most of it from this book. Because I didn't take that many psychology classes. And
I guess not.
I took one intro to psych, and they, like, talked about Freud, but, like, because he's Freud, they're like, we're not going to spend too much time on him because blah, 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 whatever. Like, we're focusing on other people.
Dude, I every single psychology class that I took in my degree, the intro to every single class was, these are the lobes of the brain, these are the neurotransmitters, this is Freud.
Yep.
Every single class. So I know Freud.
I find him interesting.
Yeah.
What I didn't know was that he could have been a really impressive neuroscientist, but he was Jewish, so he wasn't allowed to do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, cool. And I also didn't know that he started in neuroscience and then moved to psychology. And, like, I hope the author doesn't get mad with this comparison, but that's kind of the same road that Edward took, was he started in medicine and then moved into psychology in order to find a way to mix them.
Yeah. Exactly.
But
so Freud's theory of like psychoanalysis was the first actual like psychological treatment.
Yeah.
And a lot of the basis of his diagnoses were like your relationship to your mother and or father.
Yeah, to your opposite sex parent.
Yeah. And almost everything that's wrong with you is like, oh, you're female, you want to fuck your dad.
Literally.
Oh, you're male, oh, you want to fuck your mom. And this is where the whole like Oedipus complexes come into play.
And like the
so that's where Freud's like off his rocker, but
yeah. But sometimes there's something to it. Like he's not completely irrelevant.
No. Very much so.
I really appreciated his cocaine use. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
I liked how him and this one guy decided that because cocaine numbs your like nose and eyes, perhaps it could also numb your genitals. And so we're just gonna do that as well. Like we're just gonna study that.
Yeah. And all that came from like the process of like libidinal development.
Yeah.
And it's just
wild.
Freud's a character, but because he is like seen as like the father of psychology, it's
he did a lot.
Yeah.
We know a lot from him.
Yeah.
One thing in this chapter that was really interesting to me was he talks about tuberculosis and how they like found the drug that cured tuberculosis and how it was derived from a chemical that was used as rocket fuel for planes in World War II. Yeah. And we only got like access to it because we like if we had lost World War II, we wouldn't have the cure for tuberculosis.
Yeah.
Which is like bonkers. And it's also like this drug is also one of the first antidepressants because they gave the drug to a tuberculosis patient and they immediately cheered up. And so like there was this they had like a word for it. And so like some doctors thought that there was an effect on the brain from this drug that could help like quote unquote cure depression. So they were like, so that's kind of what got them started down the whole like making an antidepressant kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is wild. In
this chapter, he also again goes back to more historians and stuff. But do you say Paracelsus or how do you say?
I say Paracelsus.
Paracelsus, yeah. Okay. So he absolutely roasts Paracelsus. And if Paracelsus was like the father of pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Okay, so
something like that. He's Big Daddy Pharma.
Yeah, he was like one of the guys that first brought pharmaceuticals into Europe.
Yes, he started doing like herbs and like a whole bunch of stuff, and then he got discredited or whatever.
Well, he came, his father was an herbalist.
Yeah.
But then he, whatnot. But on page 89 of this book, he's describing Paracelsus, and it starts with, Paracelsus was neither pretty nor manly looking. He never married, and he couldn't grow a beard. It is said that he might have suffered a nasty case of mumps before puberty, which infected and destroyed his testes. But his personal motto, inscribed on the border of this image, was definitely self-assertive. Let no man belong to another who can belong to himself. So he just roasts this, like...
Could you imagine, like, you're dead, you, like, look down from the heavens, and you just see this author writing, he was neither pretty nor manly enough, and you're just like... What did I ever do to you to deserve being described like that?
And for reference, like, Paracelsus in this image, he looks like the actor from, like, The Princess Bride.
The bald guy with the... Yeah. I don't know what his name is.
But he looks like him, like, in this photo. Wallace Shawn.
Oh, really?
He looks like Wallace Shawn.
Okay, that tracks.
Tell me I'm wrong.
No.
We'll put it
up.
The comparison in the YouTube video.
Oh, that's not who I was thinking of, but 100% yes. Yes, I love it. I'll put the images up on our YouTube video. Oh my gosh.
Maybe we'll put it on our Instagram as well.
That's amazing.
But that was the intro to, like, talking about what this guy did for pharmaceuticals, and it was hilarious to me.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, so I have this, like, a couple more points on this one, is that in the 1950s, they were still thinking of, like, the body as a machine and, like, separating the mind versus body kind of thing, which I feel like is way too recent to be thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
And that, in order to get a diagnosis for depression, you cannot have any other physiological medical conditions. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's
a part
crazy.
Part of the DSM, like the requirements.
I was like, I didn't know that. I was like, that's actually bonkers. So, like, even if Mrs. P had gone to the doctor and been like, oh, I would like to get diagnosed with depression, or like, I would like to seek this, they'd be like, oh, well, you have rheumatoid arthritis, so you don't have depression.
Yeah.
Two things can be true at the same time.
Well, this is why we're at the DSM-5 now. Like, that's why the DSM has been revised many times, is because as we are learning about psychology, you're learning about different, like, things that are depression and my brain
I know what you're trying to say. Like,
different symptoms relate to different things, and the way they express themselves in people is varied.
Yeah.
So hysteria used to be a DSM like disorder, just because, and it literally was a woman who didn't want to do womanly duties.
I love how they cured hysteria.
Yeah.
If you guys don't know, women would go to the doctor complaining of hysteria, and the doctor would manually masturbate them. And all a hysterical woman needs is an orgasm. And honestly, that just feels true. We could solve a lot of problems.
I don't want to be manually masturbated by my doctor.
Yes. That's probably the worst part about that. But it's like...
I'll pass on that one. Thank you so much, Jern.
No, thank you. But you know what I mean? Like...
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, literally. It's like, all she needs is to be appreciated and have an orgasm, and she's done. Hysteria's done.
Hysteria is gone.
I know.
Yeah, but like, I feel like by saying that you can't diagnose it as depression without another medical condition, you're kind of admitting to the fact that inflammation plays a role.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that rule wouldn't be in place.
Yeah.
If it, yeah.
Yeah. He kind of touches a little bit more on pharmaceuticals in this chapter too. And so, like, with Paracelsus and continuing of him, Paracelsus and elements, and he introduced the elements instead of humors, right? So he used chemistry instead of humors. And again, he was someone who came from his father, who was like an herbalist, and he was like, no, chemistry.
Yeah.
And so what he used was sulfur, mercury, and salt. And that was the first three elements for the start of pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
And so they actually used like mercury for syphilis.
Yeah, we were just talking about this, weren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they realize, like, oh no, mercury is actually like bad for you in the blood.
Bad for you.
But they would like use it as medical treatment. And then this kind of Merrick and Roche started using chemistry over alchemy to manufacture drugs. And that was like the first like pharmaceutical company that we know.
Yeah.
Penicillin is like the first antibiotic to pharmaceuticals that was introduced in 1910. And then other drugs were tuberculosis, as we talked about, in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
And then he touches on a few other like philosophers, like Santiago Ramon y Cal, which is like the father of neuroscience.
That's
He's
cool.
a Spanish guy. And so he kind of focused more on how everything interacts like it locally in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And then Prozac was introduced for its effects of depression. And that's the first and only effective cure for depression that they have found thus far.
Pretty much. It's, the most effective for sure.
It's the one that's like the most commonly prescribed and used.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this chapter because it talked about so much. And it did talk more about like how he wants to kind of reduce the stigma around depression, and by telling them that it's all in their mind, you're kind of making them have feelings of guilt and shame around their diagnosis that can lead to other like self-destructive behaviors, and it kind of just snowballs from there.
Well, and like with him, he talks about like he prescribes SSRIs, which are serotonin like reuptake inhibitors. But he then describes that there's no serotonin biomarkers that we can track in the body. Like we can track biomarkers of inflammation through cytokines. Yeah. But there are no serotonin biomarkers because people, in order to do that, you have to do like a cerebral spinal fluid tap. Yeah. And that's too risky to do for studies. Yeah. So,
it's too difficult to get the biomarkers.
Exactly.
Which, then that makes sense.
So then how is the next chapter?
Yeah, because he also says there's been no major new advancements in drug treatment or psychological treatment for depression or any other mental health disorder since 1990. So we've kind of stalled.
And that was with Prozac, the introduction of Prozac.
Yeah, so it's like, how do we move on from here? Yeah. Which chapter 5?
So on page 112, he links so many studies that connect the brain and body. And then there's like cytokine studies, and he just kind of throws all the information at us right here about what the principle of this book is. Yeah, it was, the experiment on page 118, it was kind of like, my brain was like, okay, but like, how do you know that? Like, did you look at all the factors? And then I went and read the study, and I was like, they actually did look at all of the external factors that can contribute to the increased cytokine levels. And so this study was, they measured cytokine levels in kids at, I think, age 9, and then again at age 18. And the people who had high cytokine levels at age 9 were more likely to have depression at age 18. And so I was like, okay, but a lot can happen in those 9 years. Like, those are pretty formative years. Yeah. But they did actually account for family life, school, like poverty, like all of that kind of thing. And I was like, that was really affirming, because this book challenges what our actual idea of depression is. Yeah. And so I was kind of struggling as like, okay, well, like, yeah, for sure, like, whatever. Yeah. But then it was actually like, okay, no, this study actually, it did the work. It looked at all the things. It answered the right questions. Like, well, and that's what I love about this book, though, because like someone like me I'm trying to get into an imaginary field right now. Right? I'm already here. I'm already with Edward. I'm like, yeah, this is it. But for someone like you who is like still like, okay, back and forth, kind of skeptical about like, where are the facts, right? Yeah. So you're not just like jumping the train to like, this is extreme, let's go for it,
well,
you know?
Because I'm like, yes, I want to believe this 100%, but I've gotten made fun of for believing this. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, I need to have the answers prepared for when someone challenges why I believe in this. Yeah. So it was nice that he had the answers to the questions that people who would challenge us would ask.
Yeah. And that's because this is the science that we need.
Right? Oh my gosh. I loved it. I think I'm going to reread this book actually pretty soon here.
But basically all these studies, all all point to how like an inflammatory stimulus can cause depression, right? And so then this brings up the topic of the inflammatory reflex, which happens to be mediated by the vagus nerve. As we've talked about the vagus nerve, it's huge for like relaxation responses. And it's just the messenger like all up your spine for your entire body.
Yeah, it's the biggest nerve in your body.
Yeah. And so the vagus picks up high cytokine signals and reflexively acts on macrophages in the spleen so that cytokines fall. And so it's like a negative feedback for homeostasis. Yeah. And so if that's what, like we know that our nerves are actively trying to mediate it, but that's all showing that our brain is connected with our nerves as well. So it all of that is interrelated.
Exactly. And it was really, really interesting because he brought in like more studies showing how stimulating the vagus nerve can turn off or on inflammation in specifically rheumatoid arthritis, which is so interesting, those studies that he brought in. And I was like, that's really sick. Because I might be thinking of a TikTok, but there's like a point in your ear where you can like press on that like stimulates your vagus nerve to like calm you down.
Okay.
There is a TikTok like that, but I think he also talks about it in here.
So he talks about the alderman's itch.
Yes.
Which way back when everyone was old and wore fancy pants and lived in castles.
Yeah. My favorite time.
The good old days. Yeah. Basically, I'm pretty sure it's the aldermen. Whatever.
That sounds right.
They weren't allowed to leave the table until the king, head, whoever, was done eating. And so a lot of these people, like guys who would sit down and they would have struggles with digestion because they had to go to the bathroom so badly, but they weren't allowed to leave the table. Yeah. And so to relieve indigestion and to ease anxiety, you rub your auricle, which is a flexible collagen ridge in the shell-like outer ear just above the opening that allows sound into the ear. So it's basically kind of like in your conch area.
Oh, okay. Because I've seen like people have gotten piercings near there that are like supposed to help with migraines.
Yeah. That's different than what this is, but it's all relating to the point of like acupressure and pressure points in the ears that alleviate neurological kind of symptoms.
Yeah, I was like, this is so interesting.
So when you're talking about the nerves and nerves function, so normally nerve cells make serotonin from tryptophan, but cytokines say to make it into, neuronine, which is a toxin, which means that less serotonin, aka happens in your body, which is less mood regulation. So the fact that like when your body is inflamed, your body can't convert tryptophan into serotonin, it gets converted into a toxin, right? Which then your liver has to then process. Yeah, and if your liver isn't processing properly, the inflammation is just rampant in your body like constantly because nothing's going right. And I just wrote 5 case studies about this shit.
And tune in next week for our neurotransmitter episode.
Yeah, we will be talking about it. Yeah. And then so when inflammation reduces the amount of serotonin released in the synapses, it is effectively pulling in the opposite direction to SSRIs, which is a possible reason for treatment-resistant depression. Yeah. Which is what he's kind of trying to address of like, when SSRIs don't work, then what?
Yeah, what do we do now?
Well, inflammation. Yeah. That's what these studies are showing. Yeah. So then chapter 6 is why.
Yeah, so he kind of goes into like the sources of inflammation, like what could be causing the inflammation that's causing the depression. So you could have an inflammatory disease like rheumatoid arthritis. You could, it could be body fat because 60% of the cells in adipose tissue are macrophages. Yep. It could be your age because as we grow older, we tend to get more anxious and depressed. Love that for me. It could just be like seasonal variation, like SAD. And then the most likely source of the inflammation isn't a physical factor, but more of a social factor, which is stress. Yeah.
Well, stress promotes inflammation because it stunts your that rest and digest response. Yeah. And it releases cortisol, and cortisol draws sugars into the bloodstream to help you run away from that tiger that's non-existent. And
exactly.
Then it stores as fat, and then it's just a wicked domino effect.
Literally choose any of our episodes to understand how we feel about stress.
You can roll the dice.
Literally, just pick one.
And so life expectancy with that there's been a study that life expectancy is actually reduced by behaviorment, which was, emotional stress.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then he talks about, like, there are biomarkers for inflammation that he wants to kind of start using to almost as biomarkers for depression, because you can't really do a biomarker for depression yet.
And what was interesting here is that there are now studies finding that the immune system can remember childhood trauma, making reactions like more short fused and like ready to fight.
Yeah.
Right. Which puts you, more on edge, and you're less able to handle normal life stressors.
Yeah. That was so interesting how he goes into like the immune system has a long-term memory. So like you might not think you're holding on to that, but your immune system is. Yeah. And that's why when certain things happen, your body responds in certain ways. Yeah.
And then outside of childhood trauma, there's another study here that a group of happy and healthy school teachers who were satisfied with their work even had raised cytokine levels after public speaking.
Oh yeah, his public speaking study was really interesting.
So you can be happy and healthy and you'll still have the stress response because spotlight, people are afraid of spotlight.
Wasn't there something to do with like the reaction or like the reinforcement they got like after the public speaking? Well, no, it was the happy, healthy teachers who did the public speaking versus the tired, sad teachers who did the right. Okay.
And so they both had high cytokine levels, but the main principle of this study was the fact that even the happy, can satisfied with their jobs can have the inflammation.
Levels. Yeah, definitely.
And there's also a discovery that when you talk about like have we touched on facial expressions? And
I don't think so.
Regard. Okay, there was another study that discovered that Botox actually has antidepressant effects because you're not allowed to use those facial muscles, or you're not allowed to like emotionally express those facial muscles, which has antidepressant effects.
That feels backwards.
Yeah.
That feels counterintuitive. Like, it feels like by expressing your emotions, you should be able to like, that should help with them. But I guess, like, if you're scowling or you're, like, squinting a lot, like, you get that headache and it causes inflammation.
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole thing of, like, how laughter is contagious and you just have to smile. And if you stare at yourself in the mirror smiling, you'll eventually feel happy.
Yeah.
It's, like, the visual cues for emotion.
Interesting. I want to get Botox in my TMJ so that it stops hurting.
But that came from Darwin's idea of grief muscles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So... Which, would they cause emotion by expressing in the face? And then that's compatible with the discovery that Botox injections, which paralyze the face, so you're not allowed to use those expressive, especially in your forehead and eyes and eyebrow area.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of expression comes from, like fear, shock.
Yeah.
Happiness is more from like the eyes and the mouth, but forehead.
Interesting.
Only. Right?
Yeah. And then again, he brings up like, how has depression evolved? Doesn't seem like something we'd want to naturally select to make us fitter and stronger. And then he talks about like the relationship between depression, stress, and inflammation can be cyclical, and it's very difficult sometimes to break that cycle. It's not necessarily just like cause and effect, but it can be like you're inflamed because you're depressed, and then you're inflamed because you're stressed, which causes depression, which causes stress, which causes inflammation. It's just like a fun little merry-go-round.
Yeah. And so now there's this gene called olfactomedian 4, which is now most associated with depression. But before it was associated with depression, it was known to act as the gut's inflammatory reaction to bad bacteria.
Right.
Which brings up the gut-brain connection in my mind, at
Literally, because he references a study that found that like 44 genes were strongly associated with depression, and 4 of them were the gut inflammatory responses, and one of those 4 was this one.
Yeah, and so now people with this gene are more likely to be depressed, but also have more resistance to stomach ulcers.
So you win some, you lose some.
I think I have that gene.
Yeah. Literally, it's like, what the heck? But that's kind of him like finding like the biomarkers. Like now we can look at the genetic code for depression if there is one.
Yeah,
which is cool.
So chapter 7 is basically the wrap up. So what? What's the point of all the book? Why is he writing it? Is this willy nilly, or what can we do next? So when the book was written, 2018, there's no direct treatment for inflammatory depression.
Yeah.
There's possibility of like vagus nerve stimulation as a treatment because of its association with the brain and body.
Yeah.
To touch more on like symptoms of like nutrition and whatnot in forms of mental, he talks about like alcoholic cardiomyopathy, which causes anxiety. And so when people like drink to soothe their anxiety, they're actually inflaming it more because of this concept of like the toxins causing inflammation and causing that. And this goes back to the whole how systemic low grade inflammation causes is one of the number one causes for heart disease.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just proving that connection.
Yeah, that there's a relationship between your mind and your body. And then he kind of goes on to say that, like, he was kind of forced to abandon his medical practice if he was going to succeed as a psychiatrist. So, like, reinforcing that divide between modern medicine and, like, mental illness, basically. Like, you cannot have both at the same time, which I think is stupid.
Yeah.
And then he talks about how, like, the average life span of a patient with a serious mental illness is 10 years less than expected, but it's not solely because of suicide, but because they're dying of the physical disorders that are being overlooked due to their mental illness, which I think is crazy.
Yeah. And they're like he's looking at like irritable bowel syndrome and intermittent colitis to be likely suspects of inflammatory depression, again with the whole gut brain connection.
Yeah.
Even oral periodontitis is a suspect for depression now because it's the inflammation of the gums.
Yeah.
In your skull. It's so close.
Yeah.
And you're even seeing that now with the negative effects of mouth breathing while you sleep. That's why mouth taping has become so popular, because all the bacteria and stuff that's just like seeping into your mouth.
Yeah, really.
Wreaks havoc in the body.
Yeah. One thing that's would just ground my gears was that the doctor, he gives an example of a doctor not prescribing aspirin due to the side effects. And, like, they're so harmful because they cause, like, an upset stomach and, like, blah, 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 blah. What about birth control for women, where you have an entire fucking page, like, poster board page, double-sided, smallest script you've ever seen, with the side effects and problems that could happen.
Yeah.
And doctors are just handing that out willy-nilly.
Yeah.
They've got, like, no issues being like, okay, well, this could cause blood clots. This is called depression. This could cause XYZ. Yeah. Enjoy.
Yeah.
Like,
no, I agree. And to back him up, like, with that overuse of like NSAIDs, like like aspirin and ibuprofen, does cause digestive upset because it affects your hydrochloric acid in your stomach.
Yeah, like if you take, what is it? Yeah, it is ibuprofen on an empty stomach. It can cause, it can eat through your stomach lining.
But overuse of that too also just depletes your HCl levels. Yeah. If you're not supplementing it and with diet, and most people aren't.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so when you're having issues of like acid reflux, everyone thinks that it's over, like, too much stomach acid. Yeah. It's not the case always.
Well, that's like,
it's too low.
That's probably our boss. He complains all the time about, like, acid reflux and stuff. He's always taking Tums and Tylenol and Advil and all that stuff.
And that depletes it more because that makes it lower.
Yeah.
But if it's already low, you don't need it lower. You need to add, like, apple cider vinegar in it to substitute your hydrochloric acid.
But they could never, right? Like,
but with this whole gut brain, so I understand why they're, like, so hesitant to just, like, prescribe ibuprofen for inflammatory depression. Yeah. But that being said, they know these side effects. Then why aren't we working more with nutritionists, dietitians, and food remedies? Or that's where my brain goes. If you don't have a pill for it yet, why aren't we looking at food?
Yeah, why aren't we looking at something else?
Why aren't we looking at food quality?
Where my brain goes with that is, like, you know the side effects. You don't want to prescribe this. Why are you then prescribing other shit that's worse, that has worse side effects? And you're just like, that's just how it is. We're just, you know, take it or leave it, right? Like, yeah, it sucks to be you, I guess. But, like, here, risk your life with this. Yeah. I don't know. It gets me heated.
He then mentions a stat that I found interesting as well. That 350 million, or 7% of the world's population, had an like a depressive episode in 2012, and like a major depressive disorder, MDD. So that's not just like seasonal depression. That's
that's like an actual
chronic depression.
What is it, like major depressive disorder? Yeah.
Major depressive disorder, which is episode in 2012.
Do you think that had anything to do with the end of the world of the Mayan calendar? Do you think that played a role in that? Because like, possibly. Why 2012?
Yeah, no, that's just when the study was done, I guess. I'm curious to know about how much of that population had it in 2020.
Yeah. Oh, 100% of the population.
Yeah, exactly.
If not 2020, 2021, 100%.
Yeah. But all that is just interesting. And then he kind of wraps up this chapter talking about like Alzheimer's and schizophrenia and the history and development of them.
That was really interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting that the risk of schizophrenia goes up if you're born in the winter months.
Yeah, I know. I was like, awesome.
And he said it's not because of the baleful influence of Sagittarius, which I thought was so funny.
You can't tell me what to do.
I was like, okay, so Journey's more likely to be schizophrenic because she's a Sagittarius.
Obviously, Sagittarius sun.
Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you, Edward.
No, but overall, this book is just fascinating. I love the concepts. I love the way he talked about them and the studies associated. And to play devil's advocate, he's showing all the studies for. Of course, there are studies against, right? But
yeah,
it's you can find that with literally anything.
Yeah. He does a really good job of like giving you the studies that can prove his points and stuff. But I found like a lot of the information that he was using the studies against was really old, and I don't know if that's just because we haven't changed a lot of modern medicine, like the actual like beliefs that it's rooted in, or if that just like helped him like form that or whatever. But no, it was really, really, really good because it teaches you the history of science and medicine and depression and inflammation and the immune system, and so like
from someone
you just
who
know it.
For someone who is like well certified within the medical community. Yeah. So if you're interested in learning more about gut-brain connection and just how everything has come to be as far as what we know for mental health now, highly recommend this book.
Yeah, definitely. It's if you read any of our books, this one, in my opinion, I love it.
It's really scientific, but it's easily digestible. It's not like, there are some words, as you know, that we can't say or I can't say. But it's not, unbearable. He's not talking to you like you should already know Freud's history. Yeah,
he gives it to you. Like, if there's anything that he needs to talk about in the book, there's like a chapter dedicated to explaining what it is. He does a really good job of that. Yeah. And if you want to know more about it, we've got 10 pages of studies in the back. Yeah, literally, which is really neat. Yeah. And like when you go and read them, like they're actually like, they're peer-reviewed studies and they're so good. Yeah. But so that's The Inflamed Mind, A Radical New Approach to Depression by Edward Bullmore. Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, the radical part put me off at first. I was like, okay, what's this going to be? Yeah, it's kind of. But it's really good. It is really good. Yeah, it's radical in the sense of like. It's challenging modern medicine. Yeah. Or Western medicine. Yeah. It's giving a new idea that is not accepted widely. Which we should change the definition of modern medicine, though, if it's that outdated. Literally, though, right? Like, and he says, why is science evolving, but that's the same. We know this. We've got that. Well, yeah, I don't understand. And he even says, like, in the next, like, 5, 10, 15 years, there's going to be more and more studies like this. Like, this is going to be a more and more accepted thing. We're 5 years from when he wrote the book. Yeah. I would argue we are not anywhere near where he thought we would be. No. But I think the pandemic had a large role to play in that. Very much so. But the pandemic is also another reason why I'm more fascinated in that too. Mm-hmm. Right? Because again, we're all locked down. How much of it is the world event? Yeah. How much of it is people are eating canned shit foods because they're too scared to go buy fresh produce? Well, yeah. What's your immune system look like before you got sick? Yeah. Like, is that like, I don't know. It's a hot topic. It is a hot topic because it is fresh and people are... It's a radical topic. Sensitive. Yeah. It's caused such a division, but... I don't know. I just urge everyone to look into the principles of like nutritional psychology and psychoneuroimmunology because it's just so fascinating and your body is connected in so many other ways. Again, if inflammation can cause heart disease, why can't it cause depression? Literally. Excuse me. Like, yeah.
Like, screw this Cartesian divide.
They say so many things in here where it's like, yes, you recognize that this is something that can happen. Why aren't you exploring that? Why don't you want to help your patients?
Because it's not like money. And I don't want to bring that up, but it's not money. It's not financially incentive.
With rheumatoid arthritis, and he's like, well, wouldn't you be sad like if you had rheumatoid arthritis? It's like, yes, look into the studies and do that. But if you come up with a drug that quote unquote cures rheumatoid arthritis and cures depression or whatever,
because rheumatoid arthritis
you're going to make so much money.
Like rheumatoid arthritis acts up when it's inflammatory.
So it's like 2 birds with 1 stone. Like, you create this drug. Yes, you spend a lot of money doing all the tests and stuff, and he does a really good job breaking that down too.
Yeah.
But it's like, would you not then make a lot of money from selling that drug?
Yeah.
Like, if this is all about money, why are we not trying to find the drugs that will fix the things, right?
His argument too here is like when we have less depressed people in the world, our economy is going to be so much happier because people are actually going to be working and they're not going to be on welfare, and
it benefits
everyone,
literally everyone, to have no more depression.
Yeah. So
why are we not? Like, you're violating your Hippocratic oath if you're willfully ignoring the fact that you can do something to fix it. Yeah. Anyways, I think that's before we get a controversial topic we've had. But no, it's just to think about it, right? We're not saying it's this, that, or the other, and flush your antidepressants and screw all that. Like, that's not the case. There are cases where that's what you need. Yeah. There just are cases where that's not what you need, and that's what he's talking about. So it's we need to be able to have this conversation instead of just being like, oh, you're just like some woo-woo homeopathic, naturopathic crackpot. You're against the principles of medicine. I'm like, isn't medicine science? Yeah. Isn't science constantly trying to prove itself? Isn't medicine based off of like natural substances? Look at the scientific theory. Just read it. What's the last point? Yeah. Like, fuck off. Yeah. Anyway, this gets me rather heated, so before I scream into this microphone things I'll regret, we should end it. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm Mak Joy. I'm Mak Jubes. We are sometimes Ciabatta Slaps on all podcast streaming platforms. Yes. And social media, I guess. Whatever. On most of the platforms. If you type in sometimes Ciabatta Slaps, that's us. That is us. This has been our book club episode. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Yeah. And if you read the book, let us know. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Yeah. We have all of the book's information and our reviews of the book on our website as well, sometimesciabattaslaps.com. Yeah, we have a book club page where we give like a synopsis, our opinions, our like 5-star rating, and a picture of the cover for all the books we've done, so you guys know. We're going to tell you it's 5-star now from us. This is 5 stars. We both love it. Yeah. And next month is May, and so May is Mental Health Month, and so for that reason, we're going to be reading like a lighter book, and it's just called Good Vibes, Good Life. So it's called Good Vibes, Good Life, and it's by Vex King, and it's how self-love is the key to unlocking your greatness. How can you truly learn to love yourself? How can you transform negative emotions into positive ones? Is it possible to find lasting happiness? All right, well, that's all, and ta-ta for now. See you later. Bye.